Max Verstappen does the double on Saturday at the Chinese Grand Prix, winning the first sprint race of the 2024 season and then claiming pole position for tomorrow's traditional Grand Prix. From RacingNews365.com, my name is Nick Golding, and joining me as always to discuss today's biggest talking points is lead editor Ian No Poncho Parks today, because the weather has actually turned beautiful for a change here.
The weather was a real pleasure today, I've got to say, Nick, after Friday's shenanigans, depending on when you watch this video, of course. That was awful yesterday, as I mentioned. That really was not pleasant. But at least today, we've had a lovely dry day. Right now, the sun is just setting. As you can see, I'm just beginning to lose the light behind me. So we'll do what I can here. I'm sure our technical guys back in the office can work a little bit of magic to get me a bit more light as well. But yeah, reasonable day. And was there ever any doubt about Max Verstappen? I did predict last night that he would come through from fourth to win the sprint. Wasn't as comfortable as it could have been, perhaps. And then, yeah, those Red Bulls again, just in a different league come qualifying, as we saw. It's Max, as you say, at the double. Red Bull's 100th pole position of their F1 career, their F1 history. So hats off to them. A remarkable achievement to hit the century.
Let's start with the sprint race, as that was today's first track action under the new sprint weekend format. And you mentioned there, obviously, Verstappen won. It was Lewis Hamilton in second with Perez in third. For those who missed the sprint race, Lando Norris was on pole, but got bullied down a few places in the opening lap. Hamilton actually led the opening stages before Verstappen cruised to the front on lap 9. And in what was a 19-lap sprint race, he won by 13 seconds. So he built 13 seconds over Hamilton in 10 laps, which bodes well for tomorrow. But, hats off to how dominant he is. But the big talking point from the sprint race involved Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz. Alonso was given a 10-second time penalty and 3 penalty points, which is quite high for one incident, for being judged for causing a collision from the collision at turn 9. Alonso got a puncture and actually retired from the race, whereas Sainz picked up some damage. For you, because there's a big argument currently between some fans, so for those watching, please let us know your thoughts in the comments. For you, was it a deserved penalty, or was it nothing more than, hard racing that we love to see?
The way I viewed it was hard racing. I was actually quite surprised at the decision, to be fair. And as you say, the number of penalty points that were ultimately issued. I'll tell you what, Nick, just while I'm talking, I am going to go and shuffle round and hopefully get a little bit more light, because I can see it is getting darker. You're probably going to hear some lovely music being pumped out in the background. That's what we've been faced with over these past couple of days at the Chinese Grand Prix. Quite a lot of loud music they don't mind pumping out in the paddock here, so forgive that in the background. But at least they got a little bit better light now. So
it's probably not for Zhou Guan Yu, because he was knocked out in Q1. So, but we'll come on to that.
Yeah, but what an eventful day for Carlos Sainz, of course, which I'm sure we're going to get on into a minute with regards to the qualifying incident. But yeah, I was surprised. A heck of a day for Carlos, and I'm not quite sure on this occasion what the stewards were quite looking at. For me, it was a clear racing incident. I didn't see the need for the decision that they made and those penalty points to be handed out to him. But they've got all the angles, they've got all the cameras, far better than us to judge from our position, of course. So who are we to argue, I guess, is the comment at the end of the day.
I mean, it gives us something to write about and talk about. But then looking into qualifying, and obviously you mentioned there about Sainz, and there was another incident with Sainz in Q2 at the conclusion of his first hot lap, losing the rear of the car at the final corner, something we've seen so many times at the Shanghai International Circuit. He did come to a stop after crashing to the barrier, but did manage to continue under his own accord without anyone helping him. However, he actually then made Q3 as well. However, Aston Martin have, at the time of recording this, lodged a protest to the FIA regarding Sainz continuing in qualifying under Article 39.6, which states, any driver whose car stops on the track during the qualifying session or the sprint qualifying shootout will not be permitted to take any further part in that session. Now, being the incredible journalist that you are, within a few minutes of the Sainz incident happening, you got clarification from the FIA.
Yeah, I spoke to the FIA representative and I simply said, could you give me the FIA definition of the word stops? To which there was a nice wry smile and a little chuckle. Now, the response I was given was that this is something that has been discussed previously at Sporting Advisory Committee level. This is where the sporting directors of all the teams, together with the sporting director of the FIA, get together and where they thrash out certain elements of the FIA sporting regulations. As you've rightly read out there is this article that states stops on track. Now, for the FIA, the word stops in this occasion means comes to a stop, and then the driver and car are aided, be it by marshals, getting back to the garage on the back of a flatbed truck, to then get into the garage, and under red flag conditions, that car is repaired. If that car then goes back out on track, that is the illegal part of it. On this occasion, yes, Carlos Sainz did stop. However, he managed to continue unaided, got his car back to the garage, admittedly, whilst there was a red flag. Now, this might be the contentious point, because having since spoken to the FIA, I've since heard it from somebody else, that the fact that he got the car back to the garage whilst there was a red flag, that might be the issue. But I don't see where that is in the sporting regulations. Yes, the car stopped, but he got his car, got his Ferrari back to the garage where it was repaired during the red flag period. And of course, he was able to continue and carry on, qualified for Q3, got a reasonable position, slight damage to the car, to the chassis. That's not an issue, major issue going into the race and going forward. And obviously that led to his position on the grid for tomorrow. So at this stage, Aston Martin, who we know are well prone to protesting things, they've done quite a few protests over a period of time. I don't think this one is going to hold water, simply on the basis of the fact that it's, as I've mentioned, something that has been discussed previously at Sporting Advisory Committee level. And as I've also mentioned, I don't see anywhere within the regulations the point that I've just mentioned about, yes, that he stopped whilst the red flag had been thrown and then continued. It's one of those little grey areas again. And I know, and I'm confident that this is going to be one of those that's going to be clarified very, very quickly within those sporting regulations going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something change within the wording to the Miami Grand Prix onwards, just so everybody, us, media, fans, the teams, are 100% clear on what stops actually means within the wording of those regulations.
And of course, as I mentioned at the time of recording this, so far the protest has been made. Both Ferrari and Aston Martin have been summoned to the stewards. We don't know the outcome yet, but make sure to be checking ratingnews365.com, because we will bring you the result, the outcome, as soon as we get it. And of course, I guess the big reason why Aston Martin are going for this is that Lance Stroll obviously was knocked out in Q2 and P11. So had Sainz not been allowed to continue, that would have been two Aston Martins in Q3, and obviously Alonso went on to qualify in third. Very quickly on Red Bull, of course, you mentioned Verstappen secured Red Bull's 100th pole position. It's been another phenomenal day for the Dutchman. Perez in second for tomorrow's race. They again though look just clear of the field.
They're there to be beat. They're there to be shot at. How much of a shot any other rival will get at them has to be seen. You've got to feel that the only thing that's going to stop them tomorrow is something like we saw in Australia, mechanical retirement, maybe an incident. Who knows? Are the two Red Bulls going to go wheel to wheel around what has been described by Checo, in fairness to him, as the toughest first corner of any Grand Prix circuit that he has driven on? He really does believe it is of that level. And it is, to be fair, in fairness, one of the great corners, never mind the first corner, of any corner in my mind, that first turn. Just magnificent right-hand sweep. So unless, as I say, mechanical retirement, unless they bang wheels, go wheel to wheel, then you got to think it's a question of it's the best of the rest. At the moment, McLaren looking good for that. However, they do concede. Oh, sorry, Aston Martin, of course. Alonso lining up third, McLaren behind them, fourth and fifth, Lando and Oscar. You got to think that Fernando Alonso is going to get the better of that duel because McLaren's, as they've pointed out post-qualifying, their car is better over one lap. It's not suited, as we saw in Japan, to maintaining the race pace. It very quickly falls off a cliff. Arguably, we saw the situation there as well in the sprint today as well. It didn't really compete once that sprint race had got going, and it had to maintain that sprint on the one set of tyres, of course. So I would expect the McLarens to slowly, over a period of time, drift back through the field. And that fourth and fifth at the moment, I'm not expecting that to translate into those positions for the race tomorrow if the top three maintains their positions and if behind them the Ferraris come through, as I do expect, because as we know, they are very good on that race pace. Carlos Sainz mentioned post-qualifying that he feels there's about a 0.2 of a second per lap advantage that they have, not just on McLaren, but on the top three as well. So that's going to be interesting to play out, see where the Ferraris end up. Could Charles or Carlos get through to the third place, get a podium position? It's going to be interesting. And while we're here, I think we have to have a word on Mercedes as well, don't we, Nick?
Next
Lewis
talking
Hamilton
point.
In particular. What a major talking point.
Worst qualifying for Hamilton in 7 years. After the highs of finishing second in the sprint race and leading the opening phase, it then all went wrong in qualifying. And in a package that we know is struggling, he's from P18 tomorrow. He's got a long afternoon on his hands.
Just quite remarkable what happened to Lewis. As you say, led for the opening 6 laps. Inevitable that it was going to be pegged back and caught by Max, given the pace of that RB20. And then to qualify where he did, 18th position, just absolutely extraordinary. I spoke to both Lewis and George in the pen post-quali. I've also had a word with Mercedes as well, just to clarify some of the comments that were made by both George and Lewis, because Lewis mentioned that he differed considerably, made major changes on his car. And I just had to clarify, was that setup? Because George then, when he was spoken to, said, no, it wasn't set up, but we did make major changes. Basically, what Mercedes has turned around and said is that setup changes were made. They did differ, but they were both going for the same goal, which was quite simply to make the car faster. So what has happened is that these changes, there has not been the hoped-for convergence that they were hoping, and that is obviously why we did see quite a discrepancy. In Lewis's case, that turn 14 lockup was arguably did for him. And the suggestion is that the setup changes on his car played a part in that turn 14 lockup, because at that particular point of Lewis's lap, he was actually on par with George, and it is more than likely that but for that, he would have got through Q2. Would he have escaped Q2 with the changes on his car? I don't think so. I don't think he would have made Q3. In fairness to Lewis, he took everything on the chin. Obviously, he blamed himself to a certain extent, quite naturally, because of the lockup, as well as the setup changes, perhaps playing its part. And he was relatively upbeat about things, for want of a better phrase. The car's on a knife edge. He's mentioned that. He's really struggling with it this season, as we've seen previously in the Grand Prix that we've had so far. It's going to be a struggle. He might be able to scrape into the points, and I think at this stage, looking at what he has beneath him, that's all he can hope for, is to get into the top 10.
And just finally, before we go on to our favourite predictions, the best part of the show, Nico Hülkenberg P9 and Valtteri Bottas in P10. I mean, we talk about the importance of the lower 5 teams taking their chances when they come, and that's exactly what Haas and Stake have done.
Nico Hulkenberg in particular was very thankful of these new Parc Fermé rules that have come into place. Just a quick clarification, previous sprint weekends, Parc Fermé has basically come into force from the start of the sprint qualifying. And, hold on there. Yeah, the qualifying, sorry, I do apologise.
It's been a long day, don't worry.
No. I just wanted to get it right. As course, from qualifying that used to be on a Friday evening, late Friday afternoon. No changes could then be made to the car. For this season, we then have a Parc Fermé up to the sprint qualifying now on a Friday. It's then reopened Parc Fermé after the sprint for the 3-hour period going into the Grand Prix qualifying later on a Saturday. Haas were able to make significant changes to Nico's car during that 3-hour window between the sprint and the Grand Prix qualifying. And that, as he pointed out, helped him enormously get that 9th position on the grid for tomorrow. And as for Valtteri and Stake, again, they were also aided to a lesser extent, but they did make changes. And that really has helped. Great position for those two guys. Can they hold them? Lance Stroll behind. Lewis Hamilton, we know, is going to be coming through. Should be an interesting race to a certain extent from third place downwards if we are fully expecting a Red Bull 1-2, barring any mechanical issues or any contact, as I've talked about earlier, between Max and Checo going around that lovely turn 1 sweep.
And just finally, Ian, before you get yourself back to the hotel for a well-deserved sleep, bold prediction for tomorrow. Come on.
Bold prediction. Oh, geez. I think we're going to see Ferrari on the podium. I really do. I know Fernando has performed really well so far. He's got that 3rd place, but I do think the Ferraris have most definitely got the edge on race pace. And if I'm going to pick one of the 2 Ferrari drivers, I'm going to go for Charles. I just think Carlos has struggled a little bit this weekend with the car on this circuit. So I'm going to go Charles 3rd behind a Red Bull 1-2. I know that's not bold, but we got to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And barring anything happening to those 2 Red Bulls, then it's going to be a Max-led 1-2 for Red Bull. What about yourself, Nick? What are you going for?
Well, I agree. I think tomorrow it's going to be a Red Bull 1-2 with Max at the front of it, with probably Leclerc joining him on the podium. In terms of a bold prediction, I don't think Hamilton will get points. I think the changes they've made, the direction they've gone, particularly with Lewis's car, I think he's going to struggle. There are some quick drivers ahead of him. We've seen that Stake performing. Okay, yes, Zhou Guanyu failed to get out of Q1. I'm going to go, though, for Bottas and Hulkenberg points. There we go. That's a bit more bold.
I'll tell you what I'm going to go for then, as a bold one. I'm going to go with Daniel Ricciardo points.
He needs them.
He needs them, obviously. He has turned around and described this as a normal weekend, to use his phrase. He feels that he's much happier with the car. He's always enjoyed this circuit anyway, in fairness to him. We know he's got the new chassis. I did ask him quite pertinently, because he did want to make a big play of it at the very start of his post-quali interview. He said, yes, it's helped, but I want to test it for a few races first to really get a good feel. And I said, look, come on. Have you felt a difference with the car, with the new chassis, compared to what you've experienced over the first 4 Grand Prix? And eventually he turned around and said yes. So quite clearly he's feeling a lot more comfortable with that car, and it is a far more normal weekend for him. So I'm going to go Daniel Ricciardo, first points of the season.
Awesome stuff. And for those watching as well, let us know your podium predictions and your bold predictions below in the comments. Also be sure to like this video and smash the subscribe button. From RacingNews365.com, myself and Ian will see you tomorrow for the post-race F1 update. See you later.
Catch you tomorrow for Shanghai, folks. All the best.